Darwin sailed around the world. He came to the Galapagos Islands right there, off the coast of Ecuador, South America. There on those islands, Charlie noticed there were 14 different varieties of finches. They're called Darwin's finches today. He studied all the finches and said, you know what? I bet these finches had a common ancestor. I bet you're right, Charlie. It was a bird. And then he said, maybe this proves the birds and the bananas are related. You say, oh, he didn't say that. Well, he sure did. Here's his book right here. On page 170, Charles Darwin said, it is a truly wonderful fact that all animals and all plants throughout all time and space should be related to each other. Isn't he saying the birds and the bananas are related? Mm-hmm. I sure don't want to put any words in his mouth, but it looks to me like that's what he's saying, folks. See, what Charlie observed is called microevolution. Birds produce a variety of birds, no question. But that doesn't prove birds and bananas are related. So it is a lie to tell the students that all life forms are related. We don't know that. It could be that all life forms have the same designer. It doesn't prove they have a common ancestor. And if a book says it proves they have a common ancestor, cut that page out of your book. That's not science. See, Charlie observed microevolution. Dogs produce dogs, roses produce roses, but they are still the same kind. Microevolution is observable, it is scientific, it is a fact, folks. It happens. You might get a big dog or a little dog, but you always get a dog. And you know, I wouldn't even argue with the idea that possibly the dog, the wolf, and the coyote had a common ancestor. They probably did. But it's the same kind of animal. And a little kid can tell you the difference. I'll show you here. We're going to take a quiz here tonight. Do we have any kids in the room that are 5 or 6 years old? Who's 5? 5-year-old. Okay, what's his name? Jacob. Here we have a dog, a wolf, a coyote, and a banana. Which one is not like the others, Jacob? The banana. All right, let's give him a hand. There we go. They're the same kind of animal, right? See, the Bible said 10 different times in the first chapter, God said the plants and animals will bring forth after his kind. Doesn't say after his species, after his kind. And that's all we've ever observed, folks. See, the word evolution has at least 6 different meanings. You have cosmic evolution, that would be the Big Bang, and then you would have to have chemical evolution. I mean, the chemicals would have to evolve. Then you'd have to have stellar evolution. Did you know nobody's ever seen one star forming? We see lots of them blow up. A nova or a supernova, that happens, but we've never seen one star forming. One professor said, you know, we calculated that if 20 stars explode near each other, it'll produce enough energy to make a new star. Oh, you got to lose 20 to gain 1. You ought to run for Congress. You could help those guys borrow their way out of debt. If you're losing 20 to gain 1, you're not going to get ahead. You don't need to be a genius to figure that out. Plus, even that we've never seen happen. That's all theoretical. Nobody's ever seen one star forming. But there's enough stars out there that everybody on Earth can personally own 2 trillion of them to yourself. There's plenty to go around, folks. But then we'd have to have organic evolution. That's the origin of life. Nobody's ever seen that happen. Nobody has a clue how life can start from non-living material. Every experiment done so far has been a bitter failure for evolution. We'll cover more on that later. Then we'd have macroevolution. That's the origin of major kinds. Nobody's ever seen a dog produce a non-dog. It just has never been observed. Then we have microevolution. Now this one is scientific. See, the first 5 are religious. You have to believe in evolution. It's a religion, and it should not be taught in public schools because it is nothing but a secular religion. That's all it is. Microevolution, we shouldn't even use that word. We should just call it a variation. Then the kids won't be confused into believing that they have evidence for evolution. So you have to start off with the Big Bang, and the first 3 steps, cosmic, chemical, and stellar evolution, would supposedly take billions of years. And then organic evolution supposedly happened, 3 to 4 billion years ago. And then macroevolution happened after that. And today, all we ever observe is actually variations. And they extrapolate that to mean they have evidence for all 6 meanings, and we do not. See, going from micro to macro requires a giant leap of faith and logic. Macroevolution is a fantasy based upon imagination. Now, you're welcome to believe in it. I don't care what you believe in. You can believe in the Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, evolution. I don't care what you believe in. But I resent them using my tax dollars to teach this to the kids like it's part of science. That's where the problem comes in. You can teach your kids anything you want. But if you want to use my tax dollars to teach my kids something that's not science, and put it in a science class, in a science book, ooh, we're going to have to discuss that. I'm not going to do that voluntarily anyway. So this macroevolution doesn't happen. But teachers will give students examples of microevolution to try to get them to believe in macroevolution. It's called bait and switch. See, they will give the students one definition of the word evolution and then switch it on them in the middle of the textbook. Watch what this one does. This one says evolution is change over time. That's the first definition they give. Well, who can argue with that? Things change over time, don't they? Sure. Then down here it says, in other words, living things have changed over time. Ooh, now they've really narrowed it down, haven't they? What happened to the first four? They already skipped over everything else, didn't they? They started with living things because they know the first four cannot be demonstrated. But they want the kid to assume that it happened. They kind of conveniently skip over that. And then definition number 3, this book says evolution is defined as a change in species over time. Now they're right down to what we believe. Species change over time, but they're still the same kind of animal. So it is a lie to tell the students that what you mean by evolution is species changing over time. Because what they really mean is everything came from a common ancestor. They're simply lying to the kids. What they'll do, once they get them to believe in evolution by giving them examples of microevolution, they will slip in the other meanings like cosmic evolution and organic evolution. And then they tell the kid, if you don't believe in evolution, you don't understand science. I'm sorry, I think I do understand science, and evolution is not part of it. Evolution is part of a religion. Just because it's mixed in a science book doesn't make it science. Did you know beer is often sold at football games? Beer has nothing to do with sports. And beer does not become athletic by association with sports either. And the fact that somebody mixed in some evolution in this textbook doesn't make the evolution part of science. It waters down the textbook is what it does. There's an awful lot of good science in here. I'm not against the science. I'm just against the poison they mixed in with it, that's all. Evolution isn't part of it. See, what they're doing is a classic case of what is called bait and switch. If I ran an ad in the paper that said, new Mercedes, $10. How many of you would line up to come buy it? Just about everybody, okay. And when you get there, you knock on the door. Mr. Hovind, I'm here to get your Mercedes. I say, well, man, I'm glad you're here, but listen, actually it's $99,000. I switched the price. Well, if I bait you to bring you in with a $10 offer and then switch it to $99,000, that's called bait and switch. That's illegal. Car dealers would go to jail for that, wouldn't they? But that's what the textbooks do every day to the kids. Now, I get some professors, they'll say, you know, macroevolution is just micro over longer periods of time. Well, first place, that's just dreaming. No one has ever seen that happen. No one's ever seen a dog produce a non-dog. You have to imagine that it happened long ago and far away. It is not science. It is religion. By the way, there are genetic barriers that stop this from happening. By the way, who would the partly evolved dog marry anyway? Don't you have to get two of them evolving at the same time, of the opposite sex, in the same place, at the same time in history? They've got to find each other and be interested. You got a bunch of problems there, okay? It just doesn't work, folks. Intermediate forms have no way of living in their environment. Variations do happen, nobody argues with that, but they have limits. You know, farmers have been trying to get bigger pigs for a long time, haven't they? Do you think they'll ever get a pig as big as Texas? I bet there's a limit in there somewhere, isn't there? Do you know cockroaches eventually become resistant to pesticides? You guys have cockroaches here in Gulf Breeze, don't you? Yeah. You call them palmetto bugs. Don't lie to me. That's a roach, okay? Do you think they'll ever become resistant to a sledgehammer? I bet there's a limit in there someplace, isn't there? And see, the animals are still producing the same kind of animal. That's not evolution. Dogs producing dogs is not evolution. It's a variation. And the information for that variation was already present in the gene pool. No new genetic information is added. You only selected part of the population to survive. Actually, you lost genetic information. That's not evolution, folks. And the gene pool of the new variety is much more limited than it was before. Somebody spent years crossbreeding dogs to develop a Chihuahua. Imagine that. All that work to make a dog that is 100% useless. Hey, turn all the Chihuahuas loose back into the woods and tell me how long they will last. They'd go up to that wolf. Yep, 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 yep. Crunch. End of gene pool, right? It wouldn't happen. See, genetic information is lost, not added when you get a variety. Now, there's lots of varieties, no question. I come from Illinois, corn country. Did you know there are so many kinds of corn, they have to number them? You'll be driving down the highway and it'll say BX65, you know, don't mix it up with XL29, something will blow up. But I'll tell you what, folks, you can crossbreed your corn from now till the cows come home, and you are always going to get corn. You will never get a hamster or a tomato or a whale to grow on your corn stalk, okay? It ain't going to happen. Variations happen. Nobody argues about that. There's hundreds of varieties of dogs, and they might have had a common ancestor. It was a dog, okay? This Irish textbook calls it divergent evolution. Don't give me that. It's still a dog, okay? Giving it a fancy name like divergent evolution doesn't make it part of science. It doesn't change the facts. It is still a dog, okay? The Spanish textbook shows the zebra and the horse probably had a common ancestor. I agree. They probably did. And it looked like a horse. Probably the cows we have in the world came from a common ancestor. I wouldn't argue about that. And it was a cow. But see, what happened in the late 1700s, Hutton came along and took away the idea that the earth is 6,000 years old. And people really began to doubt the Bible in the early 1800s. And some Christians believed that they had proven the earth was millions of years old. And so in the early 1800s, they began to look for ways to make the Bible say the earth is millions of years old. And that's why they invented the gap theory and the day-age theory and progressive creation and about 6 different compromise positions, all of them unscriptural, unscientific, and unnecessary. The earth is not millions of years old. The Bible was fine. Leave it alone, okay? It's doing fine on its own. But then Charles Lyell came along in 1830 and took away the flood. In people's minds, they no longer associated strata with the flood. And then along came Charles Darwin, and he took away the creator. And if you want to see what happened to the history of the world after 1850, when evolution became so popular, you know, when we had the rise of communism, socialism, Marxism, Nazism, the New World Order, you better watch videotape number 5, which is very politically incorrect. Or we talk about, never mind, do not watch that one, okay? But it talks about the New World Order and how it's tied into this evolution philosophy. But you know those 3 false teachings, millions of years, uniformitarianism, and evolution, are still in textbooks today? Textbooks used in this town are still teaching that stuff. The Bible warned us in 1 Timothy. Paul said, Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called. Evolution's not science. It's a religion. Adolf Hitler said, let me control the textbooks. I will control the state. Professor Wilson from Harvard University said, as were many persons from Alabama, I was a born-again Christian. When I was 15, I entered the Southern Baptist Church with great fervor and interest in the fundamentalist religion. I left at 17 when I got to the University of Alabama and heard about evolution theory. And now he's up at Harvard destroying the next generation of kids coming through his class, isn't he? All you got to do is go to a secular university for a couple of years and you will run across at least one professor, probably several, and they think it is their duty in life to destroy your faith. Man, are they in trouble when they face God. Did you know 75% of the kids that go from Christian homes to secular schools lose their faith after 1 year of college? What is in these books anyway? This fellow said, fundamentalist parents have no right to indoctrinate their children in their beliefs. We are preparing their children for the year 2000 and life in a global one-world society. And those children will not fit in. Hold on just a minute. Nebraska senator, member of the Nebraska Board of Education, said he is preparing my children for something? Excuse me, sir. You just better prepare your children for what you want, but I'll prepare mine for what I want. I want mine to serve God. I don't know what you want for yours. But these books are destroying the faith of kids. Kids love to learn. That's normal. That's good. But what if the information that's in the textbooks that they're learning from is inaccurate? What if it's been proven wrong? What if there are some things in the textbooks that have been proven wrong 100 years ago? but they're still in there. I was in a debate one time, and I went through the evidence I'm sharing with you on this seminar about lies in the textbooks, and I shared 15 or 20 different things that are not true that are still in the books. And the professor got up and he said, "Now folks, Mr. Hovind is right. These things are not true. However, Mr. Hovind, I've got a question for you. What would you replace them with?" I said, "Folks, what he's trying to not say is, you know, we want the kids to believe in evolution. We have to give them some evidence. He's taken away our evidence, so it's his job to find some replacement evidence." I said, "Sir, if you don't have any evidence for your theory, I'm sorry. Maybe you should consider getting a new theory. It's not up to me to provide evidence for your theory. I think the theory's dumb to begin with." But you know, if there are some things in the textbooks that have been proven wrong a long time ago, but they still keep them in the books, you have to wonder, is the author ignorant? Or is he deliberately lying to the kids in order to get them to believe a theory? Is there really a bigger plan toward creating a one-world government, and evolution is a vital part of that philosophy? See, our founding fathers said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." See, people that believe they've got rights that come from the Creator, those people don't make good slaves. Eventually, they're going to throw the tea in the harbor, right? But suppose somebody wants a one-world government, a new world order. Ooh, now they've got to get everybody believing there is no Creator. Maybe this evolution is part of a bigger picture. We'll get into that more on video tape number 5. But here's a page showing the kids the evidence for evolution. They're going to say they have evidence from fossils, evidence from structure, evidence from molecular biology, evidence from development. What are they going to show these kids anyway? See, evolution is based on 2 faulty assumptions. Number 1, they will say mutations make something new, and number 2, natural selection makes it survive and take over the population. Neither one of those works. Now, it's true mutations happen. There are mutations in the world, okay? Probably all the roses you've ever seen are mutants from the original rose. Mutations happen, no question. But they do not produce any kind of evolution. All it is the same kind of animal, and no new information is added. This is a mutated bull. He's got 5 legs. He can't run any faster. By the way, no new information was added. Doesn't the bull already have a gene code that tells him how to make a leg? It just built one in the wrong place, that's all. That's not new information, that is scrambled information. Here's a short-legged sheep. Look what the textbook says. This mutation would not last in nature. Well, of course not, man. He's the first one the wolf is going to catch. Go, boys, go. Here comes the wolf. Here's a 2-headed turtle. It's a mutant. Not ninja, but he's mutant. See? He's going to freeze first winter. Nobody makes a double-neck turtleneck sweater. I've never seen one. Sure, mutations happen, but it's a scrambling of information that already exists. It doesn't create anything new. It's like taking the letters out of the word Christmas and scrambling them up. You can make all sorts of different words out of those letters. But you can't make Xerox, zebra, or queen. The letters aren't available. And scrambling existing information does not create anything new. Look what this textbook says. Boys and girls, here's a fruit fly. It says normal fruit flies have 2 wings. This mutant has 4. This rare mutation, like most mutations, is harmful. Then it says beneficial mutations are the raw material for natural selection. Well, now that's interesting. They showed us a harmful mutation. But they told the kids beneficial mutations is how it works. Why didn't they show us a beneficial one? Would you like to know why? Because nobody's ever seen one. Nobody's ever proven one beneficial mutation. One professor said, "Oh, I know a beneficial mutation." I said, "Really? I'd like to hear about this." He said, "Did you know in Africa, people that get sickle cell anemia cannot get malaria?" Oh. That's like saying, you know, if you cut off your feet, you can't get athlete's foot. Yeah, that's brilliant. That's not a beneficial mutation. Think about it, okay? They don't show the kids a beneficial mutation because nobody's ever seen one. This textbook says we've got evidence from evolution. Evolution and natural selection go together. Now, wait a minute. Next page it says, natural selection causes evolution. And this is the book used in Santa Rosa High School and Escambia High School and Pensacola High School right here. Okay? Natural selection causes evolution. No, wait a minute. Natural selection happens, folks, but it doesn't cause any evolution. It's a lie. Natural selection selects the strongest to survive, generally, and it keeps the species strong. It is a conservative process. It is not a creative process. It only keeps the species strong. Creation is thought of at first. It does not give you any new information. See, if you worked in a factory and your job was to check the cars for mistakes, isn't it normal for a factory to have quality control? Your job, when it comes down the line, they get all done building it, you're supposed to kick the tires and slam the doors and, drive it around and see if it works. Suppose your job is to reject all of the cars that don't work right. How long would it take that process to change the car to an airplane? You say, it'll never change it to an airplane. That's my point. Natural selection will not change the species to something else. It'll make sure it stays a good species. It's a conservative process. See, survival of the fittest is true to some extent, but it does not explain arrival of the fittest. It doesn't tell you how it got there. And kids, we're going to learn a big word tonight. Survival of the fittest is called a tautology. A tautology is a sentence that means nothing. You can go home and tell your brother, oh, you're speaking in tautologies. In other words, what you said means nothing, right? Here's how it works. You say, Professor, why did it survive? He says, well, because it's the fittest. Oh, how do you know it's the fittest? Because it survived. I see. Is that how you tell? Yeah, it means nothing. And by the way, it's not always survival of the fittest. If a whale goes through a school of fish and eats 80% of them, it's not survival of the fittest. It's called survival of the luckiest. That's what really happens out there. But some folks make these brilliant observations and still come to the wrong conclusions. That's possible to do, Maybe you heard about the scientists that were going to see how far the frog could jump. They put that big old frog down there and said, jump, frog, jump. That frog, he took off, he jumped 80 inches. They couldn't believe it. They brought the frog back, cut off one leg. Said, jump, frog. He only jumped 70 inches. They brought him back, cut off another leg. Said, jump, frog. He only went 60. They brought him back, cut off another leg. Said, jump, frog. He only went 50. They brought the frog back, cut off his last leg. Said, jump, frog. They expected he'd go about maybe 40 inches based on the data so far. He actually jumped 0. I mean, the frog did not move. They yelled louder, jump, frog! They screamed and hollered. The frog flat didn't move. They were baffled. They tried the experiment again. New frog. Got the same results. So the scientists gathered their data and they said, you know what, folks? We can conclude that the frog jumps less as the legs were removed. Now that's a good observation. I mean, you got to give them credit, folks. They did observe the data, okay? They said, so when we got to no legs, though, something strange happened. We must conclude that a frog with no legs goes deaf. No. See, you had a good observation going, but you got a bad conclusion. Jump, frog, jump. That's what happened with the fruit flies. They took the flies in the laboratory and they nuked them and microwaved them and x-rayed them, and they got those flies to have all sorts of mutant flies. They got a fly with curled wings. He flies around, bzz, 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 can't go anywhere. They got a fly with no wings. What do you call that? A crawl? You can't fly. They raised all these flies, and all they ever got was flies that were worse off than the original fly. One fellow said, oh, wait a minute, we got one fly that had wings 4% larger than the average fly. Proof for evolution. Excuse me, it's still a fly. That's not proof for evolution. That's a variation of the same kind of animal. But they got their data together and said, you know what, folks, the mutations we observed produced flies that were worse off than Grandpa Fly. Good observation. So they said, fruit flies must have evolved as far as they can go. Oh, bad conclusion. Jump, frog, jump. Maybe you could conclude that God made them right to begin with. Oh, they don't want to give God the credit, that's for sure. Then they do the peppered moth experiment. This is in just about every textbook, and it's sad that it's still in there because it was proven wrong years ago. The whole experiment was a fake. But here's what they tell the kids in the textbook. Boys and girls, they went around and counted the moths on the trees in England and found it was 95% light-colored moths and 5% black. Counting the moths on the trees. Must have been a government project. Then, so the story goes, they burned coal in the factories and the trees turned black, and they counted the moths again, renewed their grant, and found out it was now 95% black moths and 5% light. It turns out, they finally admitted, the guy faked the entire experiment. He glued dead moths to the trees. The picture in your book is of dead moths glued to a tree. That's how it was done for your textbook. The whole thing's a fake. But even if it happened, folks, it didn't prove any evolution. They started with a moth, they ended with a moth. The peppered moth experiment is baloney. Those pages ought to be cut out of the textbook. But they said the moth population was able to shift from mostly white to mostly black when the trees turned black. Sounds good. It wasn't true, but it sounds good. They're going to say, the moth population was able to adapt to the new environment. That sounds good too. Then they're going to say, see, boys and girls, this helps prove we all came from a rock. No, it does not do any such thing. By the way, the moth thing has been proven wrong and admitted to be wrong a long time ago and should be removed from the textbook. But they tell the kids to get a large sheet of black paper, 1 meter square. By the way, I like to kick this dog every time I walk by. Did you know all the new textbooks are metric? Now, I understand the metric system real thoroughly, okay? I'll take a metric quiz against anybody you know. I taught physics for years. But I'm not sure I want a kid coming to help build my house that doesn't know what a 2x4 is. So if you're a patriot, make your paper 39.37 inches square instead. And then get 200 black circles and 200 white circles and put them on the paper. Okay, now, boys and girls, we're going to see who can pick up the most in 1 minute. Ready, set, go. Well, of course, you're going to pick up the white circles off the black paper. You don't need to be a genius to figure this out. And then they're going to say, boys and girls, see, this helps prove evolution. No, teacher, this proves we've got extra money to waste in our school district. We just cut up a whole bunch of good paper and threw it on the floor. Now we got to pay the janitor to get the ones we couldn't find. Actually, the peppered moth is proof of design. God's planning ahead. He wants to make sure those moths survive no matter what happens to the background. It's called planning ahead. Did you know that General Motors and Ford, and somebody told me even Honda, will put sometimes an air conditioner and a heater in the same car? Now, wait a minute. Doesn't an air conditioner and a heater do the opposite thing? Why would they put them both in the same car? Well, you see, they're not sure if it's going to warm climate or cold climate. So they make the car adaptable to the different environments. That's planning ahead on the part of the designer. That's not evolution. And the peppered moth is proof of the designer planning ahead. Now look what they tell the kids in this book. Boys and girls, we're going to learn to think critically. Now watch carefully, kids, or you will be tricked. It says, do you think humans are still evolving? What kind of question is that? That's one of those questions like, have you stopped beating your wife yet? Well, if I say yes, I'm admitting I did.